people who don't have any tools about resolving conflict. Because again, we have to realize that conflict is part of life. If we don't have the tools to deal with it, that always causes more problems in the long run because you're avoiding and hurting other people in the process. So let's start by what conflict is not. Number one, all conflict is bad. So we need to learn how to fight fairly. And I've written down there, we can learn how to be assertive in conflict without being aggressive and hurting other people in the process. So we can do a lot of damage with our tongues. Things that we say hurt deeply. They say sticks and stones, they break your bones, but words will never hurt you. Not true. So words are almost, a lot of people who come into our program say words are more destructive than being hit.
Well, broken bones heal.
Broken bones heal, yeah.
And words don't necessarily.
Wounds do not, exactly.
They can, it just takes a lot longer.
Takes a lot longer, and we need to work it through.
Right,
Yes, yeah, with somebody else usually. The second one is, if I have conflict with somebody, that means I don't love them. And we all know that that's not true. Learning how to compromise so that both parties are content with the solution, that shows more love because you're putting the effort into making sure everybody's okay. So when we just kind of cut them out and say, I'm not going to have this conflict, that's less loving. Number three is, it's either a win or a lose scenario. So there has to be an attitude of give and take. However, giving and taking, it has to average out between people too. One person cannot always be the one that wins. The other person can't always be the one that loses. Both people have to be content and happy with the resolution. The problem with people with complex trauma is, I have to win no matter what. So I'm not going to face rejection, I'm not going to face shame, so I have to win. Number four is rejection. If I have conflict with somebody, they're going to reject me, they're going to leave me. But that's just not the case. However, in complex trauma families, we often have that model for us. You know, mom and dad have a fight and dad takes off for 2 weeks. So conflict is always bad. Conflict always leaves mom or dad or somebody else in the scenario being left. Fight, flight, or freeze. They take off. 5, conflict means that the relationship isn't healthy. If we can't get along and everything's perfect, you have the, back in the day, mom was always happy and dad was always, the masks that they put on was always happy. Everybody's always happy. If there's ever a fight or something or a conflict of some sort, all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, they're going to get divorced, it's going to be terrible, they can't be a healthy relationship if they have conflict. I mean, we actually believe that. It's not true. How we deal with conflict will show whether it's a healthy relationship or not, because conflict is part of life. You've got two individuals who have different ideals, different upbringings, different everything. You put two people together and there's going to be conflict. If there's not, maybe there's something wrong with that relationship, right? That means somebody is bending too much to be just like the other person, and that's not a healthy thing. Any comments on that?
Oh, we didn't
Wheels
lock
aren't
your
working.
wheels.
My wheels aren't working.
Jim.
I didn't know about
Tim.
It's,
There, I got that. Thank you.
Sorry, Jim. Threw in the bus.
It is going to be one of those days.
Exactly. All right, we're going to talk about the causes of conflict. Now, we all know that in relationships, most of the time opposites attract. We're attracted to other people who have the strengths where we have weaknesses. It's just kind of the part of life. So opposites are most of the time going to get together. So one of the conflicts will be different preferences, tastes, and personalities. So, look at preferences. People are going to prefer different things in all the areas of life. So, we've got, I've listed a bunch of things there. So, take for example, food. Somebody might be a meat and potatoes person and the other one loves casseroles. I mean, those are simple, basic things. Conflicts can actually come out of simple, basic things. When people get married and they're living together, everything's going to be different because there are different likes and preferences. Look at watching TV, and I've described a lot of Tim and I are absolute opposites in most things. He likes the high body count. I like the girly movies. What do we watch on TV? That at the beginning of our marriage, well, actually we didn't have a TV for about 5 years. We just chose not to. We got a TV when the kids were starting to get a little older, and there was obviously differences in opinion. So you've got to compromise. Now, Tim says, well, you're just going to have to deal with it. We're watching movies with high body count and car chases and all that kind of stuff. If he had said that, then we've got conflict because we have to agree and work it out so that both parties are happy. That's just the way it is. The other one is clothing. How much money are you going to spend on clothing? Now, I mentioned to Carmen last night, I'm a bit of a Value Village-aholic. I love different kinds of clothing. So I spend little bits of money on clothing at Value Village. I love to shop at all the thrift stores and everything. However, at some point it got to be a problem because my closets were so full. But my answer is, but I only spent $4 on it. Why can that be bad? So I refused to go to a normal store and spend $40 on a shirt. But I have no problem spending $4. So, for example, Britt and I went out last week, I think, one time, and she had a coupon. Of course, that's even more passionate, right? It's like, oh, that means I can buy even more, right? So it's an addiction. It's a little bit of an addiction for me. I got to the till and I spent $125. Like, holy crap. So Tim had to, at one point, because I was shopping all the time at these thrift stores. I always have since I was about 14, I got addicted. But at one point, Tim had to say, okay, we have to make some boundaries here. If you bring something into the house, which I did on a regular basis, I like variety, something else has to go out. So I had this limited amount of space. We're now in this tiny condo with one closet. So if I bring in a bag of stuff, I have to send out a bag of stuff to the Goodwill. And I'm okay with that because I like variety and I'm probably tired of wearing that. If I've worn it 4 times, I want to move on and get something else. So that was an area of conflict. So we had to resolve it and come to some conclusions over it.
I'd like to share something.
Yes,
here, 'cause
please do.
I moved into a place in North Van years ago, and it was a condo with one closet. And there, in the middle of the bar, there was this big line that had been drawn in with marker. That obviously this couple,
Yeah.
and I knew the woman that was there before me, and people said her husband was a little strange. But it was it was very obvious. And I thought, that's how they resolved this. This is how much space you get.
Yeah, exactly. That's great.
It wasn't right in the middle though.
It was.
Yes. Well, actually, my other daughter's husband, he had 10 times more clothes than her. So it's not just the women who have the issues. It should be in the middle,
Oh, my
right?
son.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
like that too.
Oh, yeah.
Tons of clothes. Yeah. Oh gosh. Yep. All right, then we have affection. Who likes PDAs, public displays of affection? What if one person does and the other doesn't? That can cause conflict, especially in the early parts of relationships, right? One person wants to be affectionate in public and have their hands all over each other. The other one doesn't. So you know what? You gotta come to a compromise. And I'm just throwing out all these examples because you're gonna see it's everywhere, with new relationships especially. When you're getting to know each other, there's all kinds of conflict that can arise. Now when we're talking with people who are in addiction and people who have unhealthy behaviors and stuff, they're coming to this and going, oh, yeah, there's lots of areas of conflict, and until I have the healthy tools to deal with conflict and learn the communication styles and all that kind of stuff, they have conflict all day long, and their relationships just implode or explode all the time. So their relationships don't work because they don't know how to deal with conflict. All right, so another area of conflict would be the differing values. So how do we spend our money? What's important? What do we spend it on? Are we going to save our money to go on vacations? Are we going to give a lot of our money away? Tim's dad grew up and they had 4 young kids, and he was a pastor, and he chose at that early stage in life to give 50% of his income away. So that's just huge. That means that his mom had to really learn how to make a dollar stretch, and they learned how to do that. If his mom wasn't okay with that, can you imagine the conflict? Every penny they spent would have been an issue. But because they had resolved it, worked through what they were going to do with it, they were able to get through that okay. Different values comes in when you have a job. What's your work ethic? Are you somebody who's going to work 20 hours a day? Are you going to be a workaholic? Are you going to give 100%? Are you going to call in sick all the time? Those things have to be worked out too, because that can cause conflict. Now, one of the biggest things is raising children. Once you have a family and you start having children, these are going to be huge. Most people in our addiction program are single parents. They've got other people coming into their life, and then they come in, like a guy will move into their place and change all the rules with raising the kids. They can't do that. Can you imagine the conflict that happens? So if you have one parent who has no boundaries and is permissive and allows the kids to do anything, and another parent who comes in and wants to have all these boundaries and rules, there's fights all the time. So again, you have to talk about what's important, what kind of boundaries are you going to have with your kids, but it can cause a lot of problems in relationships.
Somehow kids are born with the incredible ability to triangulate. Like they're like born as experts.
Get in the
I don't know where they got all this training. They are
Conquer and
fantastic.
divide. Yes, conquer, divide, they do it. Oh,
It's like downloaded or something. They can run courses on how to cause conflict.
yeah, exactly. It's huge. It's huge. Yeah. How about different values like time with friends and family? I have one girlfriend who expects her kids are all in their 30s now, expects a phone call from their kids every day. Yeah. And I tried to tell her at one point, I'm trying to think of if Tim phoned his mom every day, wouldn't it be creepy? Like, wouldn't that say to me that he loves her and wants to talk to her about his issues more than me? It's like, but she never got it. She still expects a phone call from her 2 kids every day.
My mom told me a few years ago, Kathy, if we ever live in the same town, promise me you won't call me every day.
Exactly.
I was crushed.
Yeah. But, there's going to be different values with how much time do we spend together, how much do we communicate during the day, all that kind of stuff.
I figured eventually she'd come live with me, and she said, I would never live with you, you are too bossy.
Yeah.
Actually, my mother's wonderful, and we have a really good relationship.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
her husband
yeah.
takes really good care of her.
Oh, nice. Yeah. But you got to find out where the boundaries are, right?
She's very independent
Yeah.
and wants to be as independent as possible, and I have to respect that.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, and with family too. We always lived 25 hours away from our family, so when we go back home, there was always conflict with Tim and I. Because I would, and I've shared this before, I would get back with my family and revert back to being like 14 years old. You wouldn't even know I had 3 kids and a husband over there trying to go, where did you go, Mom? I totally abandoned them because I went back into that fun, and my excuse was, well, I worked so hard and you're ill, so I have to be a single parent. I'm just having a break from that, and that's what I did. It caused a lot of conflicts because our values were different about what family was there for. All right, a third cause of conflict is misunderstandings. And misunderstandings happen for lots of different reasons. Could be your communication style. One of the persons might be straight to the point and they want to get the conflict over with. The other person might want to beat around the bush for 20 minutes before they get to I mean, that causes problems, right? We all understand that. Your body language. Tim has explained that when we first married, he used his finger to wag, right? And I would evolve into a bubble of crying, you know, whatever. I just couldn't handle that because he felt like my dad and I didn't want to be living with my dad, right? So he learned now, he shakes his knuckle. He does. And it was all a perception. I've never been offended when he goes like this, when he's stating a point.
Now that would freak me out.
Would it? Yeah. Yeah, so that would be a misunderstanding. If somebody did that to
I
you.
don't like this either, but this?
Yes.
Whoa.
Yeah. So it's all about your perception of how things happen. That's how misunderstandings happen. Some people are really, really oversensitive. So the person that's in a relationship with you, they've got to learn how to really be sensitive and value you and, you know, give you lots of affirmation before they talk about something that they need to talk about, different preferences or whatever. So we've got to learn how to deal with the people that we have relationships with. And the other one I wrote in here was overthinking it. Now, I live with an over-analytical person. A couple of my kids are over-analytical, and it causes a little, at some point, I mean, when Tim and I were first married, and a conflict would happen because they do in early relationships, he'd want to come at the problem from 20 different angles. So we discuss something, and I'm like, okay, whatever, that's fine, I'm okay with that. And then a couple hours later, he'd say, well, let's look at it from another angle, and we'll talk about it from here. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. And then a couple hours later, he'd go, okay, we need to talk about it from this perspective. At some point, I throw up my hands and say, enough, we're done, this is over with. He says, well, I've got 6 more points to make. Oh my gosh. So he knows now that, you know, let's come at it in a basic, I'm not that kind of a deep analytical thinker, I'm not that way, so you gotta live with it. Brittany had a best friend back in Winnipeg who was very much like that, had tons of misunderstandings because she has a chronic illness, so would have to say, you know, I know we made plans tomorrow, but I'm feeling really tired, I'm gonna have to cancel. Well, this other friend, oh my gosh, that sent her in, because she was from complex trauma, huge complex trauma, that would send her into a spiral of self-doubt and you don't like me anymore and what have I done? And then she'd go into all those ways of trying to make it better, and by the time she'd spun out of control, Britt didn't want anything to do with her anymore because she was so needy and so, but it all came from a misunderstanding. She took it as rejection and went into that downward spiral when Brittany, it was just a very simple thing she wasn't feeling. So overthinking can be a huge issue as well. All right, number 4, being human. Good morning, how are you?
Yeah, I wanted to sneak in. This is not university, man. This is like family here.
It's family, exactly. Yeah.
You slip in.
Yeah. That's okay, we forgive you. All right, so being human causes lots of conflict, and I'm finding as I'm getting older, I'm not hearing the way I used to. So my kids will start talking to me, and I usually will miss the first word in a sentence. Yeah, you're understanding that, right?
Yeah.
And the first word is usually who they're talking about. So they'll start the sentence, Marie can't come over this afternoon, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, who are you talking about? Because I missed that first part. It takes me a little longer than it used to focus on what they're saying. They get so mad at me. And I keep telling them it's not my fault. I truly often don't hear that first part of the sentence because I'm zoning out or doing whatever I'm doing. So then they have to repeat the whole first part and they get annoyed by that. So being human is getting really hard for me, getting older and stuff. But, you know, we could misunderstand what somebody's saying. We could not hear them properly. We can just be forgetful. It happens. So that can cause problems. Hopefully by the time we're getting older, our spouses and our relationships, they understand that we're getting older. But if we're dealing with our kids, sometimes that's harder because they expect you to be perfect, right? 5, unrealistic expectations. So when somebody thinks that I should be a mind reader and know exactly what they're thinking at every moment of every day, it's just impossible. I have my daughter who lives in Germany. She's a little bit this way. She used to really, we had a talk when we were together the last time. Sometimes she frustrates me because she expects that if she says one thing, that I know the whole backstory and everything that's going on. And if I don't, she feels that I don't love her anymore, or that I don't care enough to listen, or I don't care to understand her whole world. That's pretty dysfunctional. That can't happen. We don't understand what all the little pieces of somebody's life is. It just doesn't happen.
How do you deal with that?
Well, you just have to keep going back and saying, you know, I didn't know that you were feeling that way. And she'll usually back down when I explain, I didn't know that back piece that you thought I knew. You know, it's just lots of communication. She's not there yet, but I have to keep going back to her and say, because now we only WhatsApp it, right? We only talk on text, or we don't call, or sometimes video chat, but it's easier just to text people. So there's miscommunication with texting people too, right? So it's just lots of communication. We try to communicate every day so I know what's going on in our world, so I can have a bigger picture of what's going on. It's a whole lot easier than it used to be 30 years ago when we traveled and didn't see somebody for 6 weeks, you know? But nowadays it's really hard because they are a lot easier than it used to be, but still hard to get all that emotion and stuff through with texting. The other part of unrealistic expectations is that somebody thinks that I should be making them happy at all costs. You know, I need to be there for them, I need to drop whatever I'm doing so that I can come and meet your needs, and that grows into codependence and all that stuff. So if they're expecting me to be everything for them, they're going to be unhappy because it's just impossible. It's not healthy.
That measure
Yep.
of unrealistic expectations, it changes with environments and.
Yeah?
and
So give us a couple examples.
I think I'm gonna rephrase it, it's actually, there's the mirrors, right?
Yes.
In our lives, and so a lot of our expectations come from those mirrors. We learn what kind of thing we should expect, because it's
Yes.
a learned thing. It's
Yeah.
not a knowledge base that's out there, it's not anything solid. It's only when we actually establish in a clan or a group that we base our expectations. As soon as we move to another clan
Right.
or a different group of thinking,
Yeah?
that's usually where these miscommunications
Yes.
often happen, and that
Yeah.
unrealistic expectations come because you're expecting something that someone else is not aware of.
Right.
In our
Give us
market,
an actual example of what something somebody said, or can you
Okay.
think of one?
well, most often from my work in contracting,
Yeah.
is that I'll go in and I'll meet with clients and we'll start to talk about their project. And first day, even the second day, is all about bringing expectations to a balance. Because there's
Yeah.
so many, there's in the marketplace of ideas and television, the internet, anyone could have got from 1,000 different sources what they expected,
Expect.
and it came from their vantage point only, from their
Right.
perception.
Yeah, yeah.
Oftentimes it didn't come from another expert. It came from the research that they did, how they perceived what they read or saw or whatever. And so these kind of
I know, I was stumbling.
expectations. And so in order to, on the flip side of that, in order
Yeah.
to resolve that, we usually talk through like what the actual want is, because
Yes.
every expectation has a want or need behind it.
Yeah.
Getting to that, and then resolving what's achievable with what they have for resources. Oftentimes people don't take stock of the resource that
Right.
actually gets you to the achieving of what you want. So we have to reevaluate those things. That's how we meet that. It's compromising.
Yeah.
But it's talking people through their own compromise, which is a whole other form of
Skill.
counseling.
Yeah, no kidding. No, that's an excellent example, yeah. Because people they research and know things, but that's not really realistic. Yeah.
And watch those DIY shows where they're
Everything's
flip
easy,
this
right?
house and,
Yeah.
yeah, we could do this.
Yes.
They accomplish it in like 48 hours.
I know, right?
Why do you mean this is gonna take a month?
Exactly.
They
Or half an hour.
They work 3 hours a
Yeah.
day. 6 guys, but.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my. All right, the 6th one is basic selfishness.
Say what?
I know. None of us have this problem.
I know, that's.
Yeah. So, kids especially, but not always just kids. People want what they want and they want it now, they want it their way, and that's just, my way or the highway, yeah, it just doesn't happen, or it shouldn't happen. All right, we're gonna go on to, we got lots to cover this morning in this. All right. So, we've talked about normal conflict, myths about conflict. Now we're going to talk about how people from complex trauma handle conflict, because it's a whole different ball of wax. Complex trauma. The first thing that happens is we fight, or freeze. Whenever conflict comes up. And we all know conflict comes up all the time in every relationship. That's what happens. Soon as something even smells like conflict, I'm out of here. I'm going to fight back. I'm going to get angry. And again, this was their survival skill as kids. That's what they learned to do. That was reasonable in their estimation. But when you become an adult, it causes way more problems. 2, anger and adrenaline. Are involved in it. And again, that's because we had to survive. So the adrenaline gives us energy to run away and stay safe. And that is our whole perspective. We need to stay safe. So when we talk about this with our clients, everybody's starting to put the pieces together. Oh, that's what's happening. I get adrenaline, I fight, flight, freeze, and then it causes way more problems and conflict. Oh, that makes sense. So once they've got the basis of complex trauma, then we start talking about conflict and it starts to piece together. This is a really cool class for people in complex trauma. They get it. 3 is, the response is a nanosecond. And we talk about that a lot. There's no filters, they don't think about the other person's feelings. It's a nanosecond response. They don't worry about what kind of damage they're doing. They don't worry about anything that's going on, because their main priority is to stay safe and run away and keep from getting hurt again. Number 4 is they learn how to detect early warning signs. So as kids, they learned how to watch mom and dad. If mom woke up early in the morning and she's a little bit irritated, they know there's going to be conflict that day, and that's when they go hide in the room for the day or go to be with their friends. So they've learned, people with complex trauma have a really good radar system to learn to see what the people around them are like. So if all of a sudden something in a relationship is starting to feel a little bit tense, they've got that sixth sense going on. They know that whoever they're with is irritated, a little bit tired, didn't get a good sleep, they know to disappear. So they will avoid conflict even before it happens, even before there's a sniff of it. They're gone and out of there. They'll fight, flight, freeze, so they don't have to deal with any conflict. Comments on that? Everybody's like, yeah.
I live this every day.
Yeah.
You know, working with
yeah.
clients and really see this. And it's interesting because we have people too that will just almost kind of deliberately provoke it. Like, you know, I'll be dealing with somebody in crisis and somebody will come up and say, can you wash these jeans for me? can we do that later? It's not really a good time.
Yeah.
Come on, like, you see I'm with somebody who's crying hysterically. You know darn good and well I cannot get up and deal with your laundry.
Yeah.
It's, I think, I just kind of shake my head.
Well, it's funny because at Finding Freedom on Friday nights, Tim laughs about it now, but when he's actually, before the class starts at 7, or what it used to, starts at 7, and at 6:30 people start to come in. The people that come in are usually ones that want a little bit of Tim's ear. They need to talk to him. They've got a problem, a crisis going on. So they come in at 6:30 and they start talking. The next person that comes in and wants to talk to Tim, it's hilarious to watch from outside. They'll come in and totally interrupt the other person who's talking because their problem is just paramount. They have to get Tim's ear in. And then while they're talking, I mean, Tim obviously pushes them aside and says, you have to wait, I'm talking to the person. As soon as this person is done, this other person comes in and they've got this conflict, they got to figure it out, and then someone will come in and interrupt them. I mean, it's a revolving door. It's hilarious because their crisis is the most important thing in the world, and they don't even notice other people are around.
Yeah,
They wanna get their
even if-
needs met.
Even if it's my jeans are dirty.
Yes, but that is a crisis for them,
Yeah.
and they've got to get it fixed instantly. They don't know anything about waiting in line or, waiting for the appropriate time because they don't know what's going on around them. Yeah, totally.
Would you say something like that is sort of like the child within?
Yes,
Somebody
of
else
course.
is getting
Yes.
attention. I need my
Yes,
attention.
yes,
Uh-huh.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
It's interesting how much that around down here
Yeah.
revolves around laundry.
yeah,
There's a
Oh, I
lot
bet.
of laundry issues.
I bet there is,
And
yeah.
It
yeah.
causes a lot of conflict.
Yup, I can imagine, yeah, yeah.
But there's all these other things that are way more
Way more
important and
important.
way more conflict.
Yes,
Laundry is a really big issue.
yes, yeah.
It really
Yes.
is.
Just on the side, how do they get their laundry done? I don't even know.
I do a
Well,
lot.
and right now,
Did you
there's a
imagine?
couple of the shelters got broken washing machines, so now
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like, where do they go now?
So at these
You know,
shelters, they have
No,
laundry
ours are
facilities?
fixed.
Yeah, they got new ones.
We got one new one, the other one's fixed.
So
That could
that's
change
where they-
You know, front
tomorrow.
room one's down, so,
Hmm?
front room's down.
Oh, gee. Yeah, because, they're running practically 24/7.
But yours was broken, right?
Oh, yeah, I was
Yeah.
going to the laundromat.
Oh, my goodness.
What? You actually washed your clothes?
Yeah,
Wow. How do you get in?
well, what?
How did you get to move in there so somebody was in?
We were quiet laundry when the machines were broken, we couldn't, because we had to take everything, all the towels, sheets, kitchen linens,
Yeah.
everything to the laundromat.
Oh, yeah.
That's a lot of work.
And for people down here, it's sort of like wasted money too,
Yeah,
you know? It's
Well-
like I can buy food or I can buy drugs.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm wasting this.
Yeah,
Somebody told me
so a
yesterday,
lot
yeah, I
of-
spent $40 and I'm thinking, well, it's pretty expensive, but I mean, maybe you're hoarding a little too much.
yeah, right, right.
Yeah, but no, that's an issue, and it is a service we like to provide.
Yeah,
If we possibly
yeah,
can.
wow.
But regular washing machines just were not meant for such abuse.
Yeah.
But it is, these things we would not necessarily think about
No.
that bring up conflict and cause the nanosecond reflex, no
Yeah,
filters,
yeah.
reactions.
Yeah.
And it is really interesting, and I think I'm developing a thicker skin every day.
Mm. Yeah, you have to. Yeah. All right.
More.
All right, now we're gonna talk about the responses. Okay, that's not
You can make it.
The responses to conflict when you have complex trauma. Hey, the first thing they do is they avoid. I should say it in terms of we. We avoid. We avoid. So we sweep it under the rug, we don't talk about it. The problem is, A, conflict never gets solved. Okay? So it resurfaces over and over and over again. Did I spell that right? Yeah. So it keeps coming up, you avoid it, don't talk about it, hoping that nothing ever happens, but obviously it keeps coming back. We're going to talk in a little bit about this cycle of conflict. But yeah, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and all of a sudden there's explosions, and yeah, he can't avoid it. They'd rather give in. Let me just explain that. So avoiders have this huge fear of rejection, so it's easier to give in than to look at the underlying issues. And I would probably say that back in the olden day, when our parents were all growing up and stuff, that's what it was, right? It was a male-dominated society. Women didn't have as much value, as much credit. So the woman would just give in, and everything that Dad said was the law. At least in my family, he was the king, he was the law, and my mom didn't have much say. So for her, it was easier to give in than to avoid conflict. And I've talked also about my twin sister, married to a not-so-nice guy. She says that to me all the time. It's easier to give in than to fight for 3 days. So she just does it.
And this is common in some cultures also.
Some cultures, yeah, sure. Yeah. Male-dominated societies.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's even, I was reading recently about a couple cultures in Africa, the tribes down there, where it's totally a woman-dominated, and the men are abused. The men are, have no say, have nothing, it's all of women. So that was an interesting, I can't remember what country it was, but it was in Africa somewhere. So another thing they do is, instead of addressing the issues and resolving any conflict, it's easier just to cut that person out of your life. So that's not always with intimate relationships, but with friends and stuff. Something happens, and instead of dealing with it, it's like, okay, she's out of my life, I'm done, blocking her on Facebook, not letting her contact me anymore. That's an avoidance. They don't want to deal with anything, so they just avoid the situation.
But wouldn't you also say that that's almost advisable in some situations?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
If it's violating love, justice, truth, yeah, you don't want that person in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the second thing we do is fight. So that's when you get into your physical, yelling, screaming, hitting, punching, throwing things, all that kind of stuff. The problem with that is we use it to create distance and distract from the real issue. So something happens, there's a conflict going on, and then the person who's very violent and aggressive, they start doing this. The problem is they're using the anger and the fear and of the other person to not deal with the real issue underneath. So that becomes their powerful way to solve it. Who's going to go ahead and confront somebody who we know fights and screams and yells and throws things? Nobody. Nobody's going to do that. So it creates a distance so that they can kind of keep the walls up, keep themselves safe, so they don't have to deal with anything that's uncomfortable. B, it can be addictive. So you get this person who's got all this adrenaline rush and the anger. We all know all those chemicals are going off in the brain. A lot of people, we actually know some of these people that the anger becomes addictive because they got positive reinforcement for it. It made them feel alive. It was a physical rush. So of course, next time something happens, instead of dealing with the conflict, let's get angry. It makes me feel powerful and nobody can confront me, nobody can do anything. And it becomes a cycle of what they use to avoid any problems in their lives. Of course, it doesn't work, but you can't tell them that at the time. So we also know that along with that, from the addictive part, anger masks the hurts. It makes them feel superior. The problem is they become self-righteous and think that what they're doing, what the other person is doing is wrong. And so if I get angry, then I'm a better person and I can figure it all out. So, one of the examples I wrote in here is to get angry when someone points out one of my flaws. Somebody says something to me, there's a conflict, you shouldn't have, can't think of an example off the top of my head, you shouldn't have done that. Well, if I get angry and lash out at that person, I'm actually putting them down and telling them they're wrong without having to deal with anything. It's easy to do that because then they'll never bring it up again. And I can stand back and go, okay, phew, I don't have to deal with what that person says that I've done. They're probably wrong. So my anger is kind of pushing them away and pushing away truth because I don't have to deal with it. So we feel justified in hurting that person because it keeps me safe. Like, how dare they? The thing is, I don't want to have to deal with any of my shame issues. So it makes me feel better that I push them away. Is that clear? I'm not sure if it's clear in my head. Yes? Clear? Okay.
That's mine.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, yeah. And the other part of that is it triggers a venting of anger. Triggers venting. Okay, so conflict, when it comes up, it'll trigger a venting of anger. So if I respond with anger and frustration and push them away, it intimidates the other person, and then I can control them with my anger. So they can't come at me anymore. So those two kind of go together. Yeah. However, the point down there at the bottom is we must recognize in that moment that we can't sort through our feelings. If those kind of things are happening on a regular basis, we can't control those feelings. We may have to step back so that we can deal with it in a healthy way once we get all the tools. So this backing away and putting up the anger and the fighting, it's not a healthy response, but if we don't know how to do it differently, we may have to back away so that we can learn how to deal with it in a healthy way, and sometimes we do have to push people away. So number 3 is, I think I'll start again at the top. What's our time? Number 3 is flight. And under that we have our passive-aggressive approach. So we stuff it all down, we don't tell anybody how we feel. We often will store away that conflict or anger for another time when it's eventually going to explode. We pretend we're fine, we avoid anything and tell ourselves that it's their issue, it's not mine, they gotta deal with it. So the other way we can do that is through silent treatments, one-word answers, sarcasm, that's the big sarcasm one comes out again. That's our passive-aggressive way to kind of flight and run away from the problem. We use sarcasm, that helps us to feel better. And we're going to finish that and then go into the cycle. All right, number 4 is guilt. So if a conflict arises, I will immediately take the ownership and say it's my fault. I've done something wrong. I'm a bad person. All the shame floods in, and we feel like we're taking responsibility for it all, and then we go back and beat ourselves up. So that's kind of the opposite of what we see in a really angry, normal person. Yes?
I was going to say to capitalize on all these, they're not mutually exclusive.
Oh yeah.
You get people who run through in situations the whole gamut.
Oh yes.
Right?
Oh
so
yes.
at first you brought something up, they're like, oh, I'm avoiding the heck out of this
Yes.
place. And then they'll start to fight back and get angry, just so that they can find a way to get out.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
So it's like you're seeing
all of them
using that, or
because the first one probably didn't work, so they're going to try a different approach. It's kind of that manipulation. I'm going to see how I can make it work.
or people will flight and then they'll expect you to chase them
Yes.
because they want control of starting the fight.
Yes.
Why are you chasing me? And then they'll unload on you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, all those things. Okay, let's take a break. Yes, yes, please.
Just in terms of the avoidance.
Yes.
Right? Because I think that that's one of my natural tendencies.
Sure.
And that's how I've done things in the past. But
Yeah.
I've also started to learn about myself times when I'm particularly vulnerable
Yeah.
and emotional. And I wonder if I wonder if in those times, because I've learned to sort of guard myself in those times, and I do have to take a step back
Yep.
because I don't want to.
And
be
that's
harmful.
self-awareness, yeah, that's great.
Right, and so, you know, sometimes when I'm taking a step back, it's very much because I'm allowing myself to process
Yeah.
a bunch of things. And I know even right now, there's so many things that I'm processing in terms of my family and in terms of my past, right? And there's also at the same time so many things going on, and I have to take a step back and
Yes.
just deal
And
with it.
that's totally healthy. That's totally healthy because you know, you're self-aware enough to know what you need and what you can't handle at this moment.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just have to step back.
Yeah, and I think I know also just from experience now who I can identify as like safe people that I like allow in my world just because I know that I can share who I am and not be judged and not interpreted or whatever,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, so.
No. Sounds like you're a little emotional. It gets me a little emotional.
Yeah, which is why I'm like, I'm not speaking right now, but
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
I'm gonna cry.
Yeah, but thanks for saying that. Yeah, that's exactly true. Sometimes you just can't handle it emotionally, and you have to step back until you're well rested and feeling better and can sort through and process stuff, and that's totally okay. Yeah. Good. All right, the cycle of conflict. How many people are aware of all this? This is kind of a basic conflict teaching thing. Yeah, most of you? Okay, so we'll go through it quickly.
Most of us have experienced it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think Tim mentioned it.
Tim, yeah, he could have, because he did some of this stuff ahead of time, yeah. So we're at the honeymoon stage. It's usually early in relationships. But then, of course, especially if it's a new relationship and there's close contact with each other, are you living together, married, whatever, and obviously conflict starts to come because that's part of having two different people coming together and working through issues. So pressure is starting to build. So if you're not able to deal with conflict and you're just not sure what to do, you don't have the healthy tools, then pressure starts to build. So you start to avoid each other a little bit or take little shots at each other just to let you know that there's problems, that you're not happy. There's all the different techniques of trying to manipulate each other, all that kind of stuff. And so what happens is the pressure builds and you all know that it's building. You both know that something's going on, something's going to happen, and we learn how to sabotage. Okay, we know there's a fight coming. Let's just sabotage it so that we can get back to the honeymoon period. So after there's sabotage, there's hurt feelings, there's abuse, neglect, all those horrible things that happen. And then the reason that we're doing that is so we can get back to the honeymoon stage. Then, of course, pressure starts building again, and the cycle repeats itself and repeats itself. But what happens is the cycle gets shorter and shorter and shorter. So the pressure builds for a very short period of time before you start to sabotage, and all these things happen, and you're going around. So it's a really, really dangerous cycle. The problem with it is still nothing is being resolved. The conflict that has begun all this process, nobody's talking about it. You're too afraid for various reasons, rejection, abandonment, all that stuff. There's a reason why we don't want to deal with it because we're afraid, and so the cycle keeps going around and around faster and faster and faster.
Well, doesn't it go around faster because there's additional things going on top of it?
Of course.
It's not just the one.
Because once you sabotage it, now you've broken trust.
And then you have other issues that.
Yeah, and they just build.
Yeah.
And so the original conflict hasn't been dealt with, but all the others are layering on top of.
Yeah,
Layering.
Layering,
That's why
yeah.
the cycle goes shorter.
Yeah, and that's why it gets shorter, because then more things trigger the anger in us, the depression, or the fear, all that stuff, so the more that's laid onto it, the faster it goes. Yeah.
I actually remember having this, like, as far back as I can remember, like a 3-4 years old with my mom. It was just like this tiny little circle, always doing that because I know, like, man, might as well get the
Yeah.
over.
And you remember doing that, eh?
And,
Wow.
yeah, and then she would, and then I'd like go into my room and then she would like spank me, and then afterwards, like after a couple hours, it felt like she would come in and be like, I'm sorry. And then I just want that I'm sorry from her, so I just keep on sabotaging.
And the thing with it is, once we sabotage, the pressure dissipates, right? It's not as stressful and whatever because all this has happened and then you're back at the honeymoon. You haven't dealt with the real problem, but that pressure is down. Everybody's happy, everybody's on their best behavior, they're doing what they can to make everybody happy. But then again, the pressure starts to build again, okay?
Is this where cutting comes in for individuals who don't have conflict, don't know how to have conflict?
Yes.
And they won't go into that place with another person, so they self-abuse?
Yes, absolutely, because that sabotage, that cutting, releases the pressure. You know, feeling that pain and that anxiety and stuff, it kind of makes it go away for a little while. Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Yeah. So let's talk about breaking this cycle. The first thing it involves is being real. We need to learn how to be vulnerable, and when we're in this pressure building here, start to deal with the issues. But to do that, we have to be real, vulnerable, authentic. We need to talk about what's going on and come into compromises. But I have to own my stuff. And we're going to talk a little bit later about why people with complex trauma can't own their own stuff. They just don't know how. So we're teaching them how to resolve that conflict. 2 is knowing what is mine and what's not mine. So we need to get the other person's perspective. How are they feeling when I say this sort of thing? Or how are they feeling when I do this to them? You know, so it's learning what is my stuff to kind of be able to accept and apologize for, and what is theirs they need to accept and apologize for. So it's back and forth. The other part is learning about complex trauma. We have to learn about our beliefs in conflict because we talked about the myths. So if we believe that there's got to be a win-lose situation every time, we're not going to be able to deal with the conflict that's happening. So we've got to learn about our complex trauma and what we believed as children and how it kept us safe. And then it involves seeking help. To understand the deeper issues of shame and guilt. And that's this avoiding conflict and all the conflict stuff. We don't want to go there because it makes us feel afraid and it makes us feel shameful. So that's the whole basis of complex trauma, and that's what everybody is here to learn about. So the clients get it when we talk about it that way. All right, so let's go on to the role of shame. Okay, so when there's conflict, well, let's just go healthy shame, and I put this at the top. These two are going to be diametrically opposed. So we've got healthy conflict, and we have unhealthy conflict. And they're right down the middle. All right, so healthy conflict. The whole point of healthy conflict is to see it accurately. It requires self-examination. It involves awareness, self-awareness. It involves disclosure. It involves vulnerability and a willingness to own my part. So that's a healthy conflict. So a conflict arises and we learn how to self-examine, we're aware of what our needs are, what the conflict is about, what our preferences are, how we can compromise. That's all part of healthy. So, in here in brackets, I'm going to put shame. With shame, we have to hide the real me. We have to, we can't look inside ourselves. We can't have more shame. We have fear of further shame. We have fear of humiliation. And we fear disrespect. So just take a look at those both sides. They are diametrically opposed. You can't have them together. They won't work. They're the exact opposites. Self-examination to see where I'm at fault or I can change things. Over here I have to hide the real me. Doesn't work. You can't put them together. So people who have come out of complex trauma and shame, they are unable to have healthy conflict. It doesn't work. So let's talk about the nice thing about you guys having all your notes is I don't have to stop too long and let you write it all down. It's all there. All right. So this is how it makes me feel. Okay? So conflict. This is how it makes me feel. 1, I do whatever it takes so that it's not my fault. I will do whatever it takes. I will lie, I will cheat, I will distort reality, I will blame others, and I will get defensive because I cannot, because of the shame, I'm going to write in here, shame. I can't let it be my fault. I can't accept that. Again, it's a win-lose situation. Win-lose scenario. So shame demands that I win at all times. It becomes about being inferior versus superior. On every side of an argument, because I grew up with complex trauma, I have to come out feeling superior. And I can tell you 100 stories of what I did as a young person, teenager, because any kind of shame that came onto me, I had to twist reality to make sure that I came out feeling better than everybody else. And I was a very self-righteous Christian, right? Every choice that I made had to be better than everybody else's, or at least I had to make it feel that way. So I was a very self-righteous Christian. Did a lot of damage. Did a lot of damage in my youth and 20s even, until Tim started fixing me. 4, we become codependent. Because I'm going to sacrifice everything in order for you to like me. So I'm going to do all I can to make sure you're happy and your needs are met, because I can't come off feeling shame because I'm not fixing everything and making everybody feel better. So I'm going to avoid all this conflict because of my shame. And then number 5 goes into how it makes me respond. Okay, so I'm going to put some points down here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to avoid, and we've talked about that. I'm going to avoid, I'm not going to share anything about who I am, because I don't want there to be any conflict, because the conflict makes me feel like I have shame. So I'm going to lie, I'm going to minimize. Sorry, did somebody say something? Yeah. Minimize, I'm going to excuse and protect my vulnerability. I'm going to blame, I'm going to play the victim, and I'm going to want to be rescued so that it lets me off the hook. I'm going to win no matter what, and that's how I'm responding to this feeling of I can't win or lose, or I can't lose, I have to win. So it's going to make me respond by having to win at all costs. No matter what, I'm going to attack the other person. I'm going to twist things around. I'm going to question their perception of things. What's that called?
Gaslighting.
I heard that on TV the other night. I'm like, oh, they're my show. We're going to make them wrong, make them look like they're the wrong person. I'm going to look for allies so that they will surround me with all what I want to hear. And I'm going to redirect things so that it's totally irrelevant. Well, that's under the avoid, yeah. And then, something we haven't talked about is I'm going to discredit. I better write this way. I'm going to discredit the feedback. So how am I going to do that? I'm going to discredit the messenger. So if I can make them look like they've made mistakes and they're not a right person and they're gaslighting us, if I can discredit them, then I don't have to accept that I've made some mistakes and that I have to deal with conflict and consequences. So I do that by saying that they're more screwed up than me, so why do I have to listen to what they have to say? I don't. I can be judgmental, I can be confrontational, and I can blow everything off. It's their issue, it's not mine. So if I say it's their issue and not mine, I don't have to think of any of it as having truth. Don't even have to deal with it.
Can
So,
I just,
yeah.
I just wanted to add something.
Yes,
So,
please.
you know, and I'm certainly not perfect in this area at all, right? And realizing that, but I was at school this week. It was a really hard week again. And there's this girl, and she's really hard to love and like some days,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Complex, right? And probably borderline personality disorder,
Sure.
which is very complicated.
Yeah.
And you know, there was a conflict, and because I had kind of was looking at it through this lens that I never really could articulate in detail before,
Right.
I like her better. You know, I just kind of say I had more grace for her. Like
Yes.
I you know think, oh, I'm a good Christian, I have grace for people, but I really inside, she was really hard to love, and it helped maybe change my consultation with the administration about her because I was able to see through this.
Wow, that's
So that was
nice.
really cool. So I just want to
really
say
good.
thank you for that.
Yeah. So I'm really pleased that a lot of these professionals who are working with some of these damaged children are learning a little bit more of why they are what they are and
Yeah.
how. In a lot of ways it's not their fault because they used all these skills to survive, to be safe. And now, of course, they're acting out and we want to punish those behaviors. But it's often because of the underlying issues, and it's, again, yes, it's their fault in ways for how they respond, but they don't have the tools. So I'm just really grateful that a lot of professionals are here learning how to deal with these kids and adults in different ways.
And I mean, as a result of our profession, we must do Pro D on a regular basis, and so
Right.
that's part of our whole profession. But
Yeah.
I gotta say one thing about this course, just a little shout out, because the detail that you go into is quite extraordinary, and I think it's something that I haven't captured before or seen before, been
Right.
exposed to, so I'm very grateful. So
Good,
thank
yes,
you.
thank you for that, yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Any other comments? Anybody else want to share some of the conflicts they've been involved with that kind of are making sense a little more now with complex trauma?
I have a niece. She's 6 years younger than I am, and yeah, she grew up very, very hard. My sister's husband was an awful person, and my sister's life was pretty much hell until maybe the last 12 years of her life. And so Lori grew up with real complex trauma. And you would think that because our close proximity in age, that we would be quite close, but I have basically had to cut her off.
Yes.
I basically had to stop her. She's about 16 years old emotionally.
Right.
And
Right.
yeah, it's, and when I see this, because I know that I have made, sending an email, sending a text, I have worked on it, and and I've been so careful how to word things from her or to her, if I'm sending something so it's not misunderstood, so it's not. And I sent an email not too long ago because she's had some health issues, and I said, you've had a really rough year health-wise, and oh my gosh, I basically ended up saying, please don't text me anymore.
So how did she respond? She turned it into a conflict or what?
Yeah, she did.
Huh.
I can't even, because her emails were so horrific I could only handle the first line of each.
Oh my
Not
gosh.
each email, but text. I could only handle
Yeah.
because I thought, how are you getting from this
Yeah.
to Grandma wished that her mom had never married her dad. Grandma said she, and my mom never said that.
Right, right.
But I'm sure she thought it.
Right. Yeah. Oh.
But my mom would never say anything
No.
like that. And I don't know how she went from there to here.
Wow.
And so finally I just said, please don't text me.
Yeah.
And you know, and I actually feel really good about it because it was a chore.
Yeah.
She was a chore.
Well, it was taking a lot out of your emotion,
Yeah.
even to read those emails. So putting up those boundaries isn't
Yeah,
healthy.
and I just, so I haven't heard from her since.
Yeah.
But I did have to ask her twice not to text me.
Really, yeah.
Yeah. And, yeah.
That's tough.
But then I listened to my other sisters like, oh, she texted me again. Or she's sending me pictures every month. She's a very self-centered.
Right.
I don't want to say girl, but she's not a girl.
Yeah.
She will send you continually pictures of herself.
Yeah.
She was somebody who was obese, underwent gastro
Oh, okay.
surgery, became quite thin.
Right.
She was always very beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
And now she's gained weight again. And but while she was thin, it was continual
Pictures.
continual pictures. Yeah. But I just had to do that. And
Yeah.
Actually, I'm very peaceful with it.
Good. Yeah, yeah. It sounds like it was the right decision.
I'm just so aware as you went through this that, you know, you have to be obviously always self-aware.
Yes.
You know, because I am a person who loves to win, and so
Yeah.
and I could be fairly quick and fairly
Right.
strong, and
Yes.
so I used to just destroy people, and
Right.
my wife especially.
Right.
That's why there was nothing left after 7 years. But yeah, just to always be self-aware,
Right, right.
because it can come up very quickly.
Yes.
And then, you know, to just dice people up it comes easily.
Yeah.
So it just, you know, to always try to be self-aware, and then when it hasn't happened, to make sure you go back to apologize.
Right,
Because
exactly.
it's a very dangerous,
Yeah.
terrible weapon.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Like they say, 1 nanosecond.
Yeah.
And you're like,
Yeah, that's how we respond,
and it's
yeah.
like, oh, bad stuff. So I started doing that because
Good.
I'm really like that.
Yes.
Just snap.
Yeah.
Well, see, the thing is, for me, it's what's a little bit worse almost is that I don't have to get angry about it, but I can just calmly just dice somebody, right? And that's really bad.
Yeah.
Because then it really comes on them. Because
Right.
you've done it calmly.
Calmly, yeah.
And, you know, you've just been able to, before they get to any response, you've already angled it.
Right.
So you just are able to just, yeah, it's a terrible weapon.
Yeah,
stepdad is
and
like that.
when you have that patient and calm, you appear more credible
Right,
than the
Yes.
other person who's doing the
Yes.
nanosecond
absolutely.
response. Whether you're more credible or not is.
Right, then you take advantage
You
of it.
appear that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Well, and then gaslighting would come in, right? So that
Yes,
all of a
absolutely.
sudden that person is, you know, questioning their reality. Maybe I didn't see that right, or I didn't hear that right.
And a lot of people go by your tone of voice instead of what you're saying until after it's like, oh,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you just said like all these things about me and I couldn't even
Yeah.
defend myself because I didn't even know.
Yeah. 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 Definitely. Yeah.
And unfortunately, I passed it on to my daughter.
Which
And,
one?
Jessica.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and unfortunately, again, my wife can't keep that pace.
Right.
So my daughter could just dice her.
Yes.
And I was like, why didn't you say, she was, by the time I wanted to say that, she was already 2 steps ahead of me.
Yeah.
And so she has that exact ability
Wow, yeah.
to.
Now, does she use it on you?
But she can't, so it,
No.
so it frustrates the heck out of her. So she just immediately yells and runs out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because as soon as she starts, I angle her.
Right.
And boom, you know,
Yeah.
explosion.
Oh, to be a fly on the wall.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So, but it's helped me recognize it more.
Yeah, for sure.
I see her do it
Yeah.
constantly, and I just, you know, as my wife always says, she's your daughter.
Yeah. Doreen, you you wanted to say something.
Yeah, well, there are people in my life, in my family, that I've sort of cut off because
Okay.
of this situation. Well, last night I spent some time with my mom, and I went to my aunt's house because she was spending the weekend there. And one of the people that I've sort of cut out of my life, but I still,
You're
I'm civil and cordial because whatever. She's my sister. Well, she was at my aunt's house, and I haven't seen her in a year. And the moment I walked in the door, it was like she attacked me verbally. They were watching, I don't know, something about Trump, and she was just really like fired up and frantic about it. And she goes, "Don't you agree?" And I went, "Whoa." I said, "I don't really care about the U.S. politics."
There you go.
You know, really, I just don't. And she just like, "Are you a Christian? You're supposed to be a Christian. Christians do that." And I just went, "Yes, I am a Christian." And then this little dog came up, and I was
Good,
like,
thank goodness.
I'm thinking, my aunt's going, "Can I take your coat?" I said, "No, I won't be staying." I said, "I have things I have to do."
Oh, good for you.
I'm
Yeah.
not gonna sit in this
Yeah.
house and listen to this.
Yeah,
I haven't
yeah.
seen you in a year, and this is how you.
Yeah.
Well, whatever. And I said, "Oh, by the way, you know, I had a little discussion about what happened to my mom in the week, just to keep an eye on her." And I said, "So, have a great weekend, you guys."
Good for you, though. You were able to acknowledge that that was an unhealthy environment.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You put up your boundaries, yeah.
Unhealthy or she just like exploded.
Wow.
And it was, but she's got it like
Triggered, yeah.
she's triggered, and she has major complex trauma and addiction issues and all that stuff. So it's like I love you, but I love you from afar.
Yes.
Bye.
And that's what you have to do.
Some people you just do that. But talking about this is like, oh yeah, I went through this last night.
Yeah, no kidding. Yikes. Anyone else want to share a conflict they've been in recently?
Just one?
Yeah.
I said just one?
You don't have enough time. Tons of tickets. Yeah. Do you want to share one?
I actually wanted just to share, like, on point number 5, just talk about the shame-based responses.
Yes.
That's usually the way to see there is shame. Typically, we see the responses before we understand the shame that's
right.
there, or the fears behind seeing the shame.
Yes. Yeah.
People are just doing that.
I really see Donald Trump in 5B.
Yeah, right.
Win
No matter what.
and the gaslighting and all that, and yeah, I'm sort of looking at him from a new perspective.
Well, there's a whole philosophy in life to live under some of these.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It protects the people with the complex trauma.
Exactly.
To
It damages
validate
everybody else.
All
Yeah.
their responses is healthy.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, we are now going to go to tools. Yep. Tools to resolve conflict in a healthy way. This is where we're getting to. So the first thing we have to do is manage our emotions and impulses. Okay, so we need to learn how to bite our tongue, walk away from it until you're calm, until you're ready. That mindfulness, just kind of grounding yourself a little bit, breathing, relax, and watch. This is something that we don't always listen to, is watch your inner dialogue. Because you can walk away from a conflict, but inside you're saying, oh, that person's such an idiot, and I don't know, and this is what I'm going to say next, and whatever. It's that internal thing. That can get you into as much trouble as the external, exploding and stuff. Because if you're going this route and doing it quietly on the inside until you get back together again, you're just building up your munitions dump. And then you're going to explode when you get back. So that doesn't mean just being quiet, not saying anything. You still have to work on the internal.
I've been telling myself now, okay, get out of limbic brain.
Yeah, there you go. Good for you.
It's my cue to myself.
Yep, good stuff.
Limbic.
Limbic, yeah, that old limbic.
I'm in limbic, get out.
Yeah,
Move the cortex.
yeah, good. We have to have a no disrespect rule. So we have to make sure that we don't show disrespect. Now, when people have conflict with me, the disrespect that they show is what triggers me more than anything else. If I am disrespected, oh my gosh, my emotion just, and I've worked for years to get a hold of that. It doesn't happen a lot, but if somebody disrespects me, oh. So, on the other hand, I can't disrespect them because I know what that feels like, right? The eye rolling, the sighing, the, yelling or bringing up things from the past. You disrespect me, that's going to be a really hard one to control. So we're not going to do that to other people. We're not going to disrespect. We're going to own our own behavior. That was a big sigh. So we're not going to minimize what we've done or said during a conflict. We need to own it and apologize and help the other person feel safe and restore trust. So yes, conflicts can get out of hand. There could be disrespect. There could be inappropriate behavior, all that stuff. But if we do something that we know is not appropriate, we need to go back and own it and apologize for it. And that shows the other person that you respect them. If you respect somebody enough to go back and apologize, that actually builds the relationship. That's really true with kids. We were raised in an environment where the parents would never apologize to the kids because that's a sign of weakness. The kids are the little guys and the adults are back here. But then when I started to learn, when I had my own kids, when I apologized to them, wow, that just changed everything. They all of a sudden learned to respect me a little more, learned how to approach me. Our relationship was building because if I try to pretend that I'm perfect and I never make any mistakes, they want nothing to do with me. So if I can start apologizing when I have made a mistake, and we'll all do it all the time, that's what we do, as long as we can own it, we can grow from that and build relationships. 4 is we need to assess our state of being.
I just wanted to comment on number 3.
Yep, please do.
I wanted to share an experience from here I am.
Yeah.
My 3-year-old has been a lot of temper tantrums like that. It's just the state, overtired quickly, and so we started doing this thing. There was one day, and I gave him a swat on his butt. He was just kicking and screaming, and I had warned him, and he pushed the limits, so he got it. And then I went back and realized I had probably given him too hard. It was just hard to gauge in the middle of kids flailing around.
Yes.
So, but I went back and I said, you know what, I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Right? You deserve the discipline.
Yeah.
You understand the rules, and the rules were broken, and there are consequences, and we talked about that. And he gave me the hugest hug.
Oh.
And for now, it's been like over a week, and he come back to me, and he's watching scenarios play out, and basically going like, Daddy, you were right, and I was wrong.
Whoa.
And so there's this.
I got goosebumps.
I'm like,
That's
this
cute.
is so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they catch on to things so much, and that's just limbic brain, right? He's not into all that context.
Yeah. So they're watching how we handle when we make a mistake.
Yeah.
And that's their
So
model.
if it was
That's what
okay
they're
for
learning.
me to admit it,
Yeah.
then it's definitely okay for them to.
Yeah, excellent example, yeah. So we have to assess our state of being as well. If you're tired, you didn't sleep well, you're just crabby, just things aren't going well, you got lots of little things going on, then we need to maybe back away, like just exactly what Cherry said, back away, we'll deal with that kind of stuff. We're not ignoring it, we're just putting it in the back burner so that we can deal with it later. They used to drive me crazy with Tim because he was often not feeling well. By the end of the day, he was really, really, really tired. So I'd want to deal with something, a conflict that was going on, and he'd to say, no, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Oh, that used to make me so mad because I want to deal with it now and get it over with because I was anxious and upset about something. But he knew that he couldn't deal with it in a healthy way when he's tired and not well and feeling out of sorts. So we have to find out where we're at, and then later we can deal with it properly.
So in that case, when you just said there, he knew where he was.
Right. I didn't.
But you didn't. So how did that resolve it? Because that.
How did it make me feel?
Right.
Yeah. Well, Tim's famous statement is, we need to learn how to sit in uncomfortable emotions. Because in addiction, any uncomfortable emotion, and we avoid or neglect or go the other way and, get busy so that we don't have to feel it. We have to learn how to sit in it and feel it. So I had to sit that night in that uncomfortable, unresolved conflict, but it was good for me.
No, I can see that it would be, because you wanna be both on a calm level first.
Right, exactly.
But I just was wondering how you dealt with it.
Yeah,
because-
yes, yeah. Well, I actually got to make my case for longer, right?
I was gonna say, 'cause you drew on it and make it harder.
So tomorrow I'm gonna say this and this and this, and I'm gonna back it up with this experience, so it actually was good. But I'm not one to sit in uncomfortable feelings. My stomach gets upset, I almost sometimes throw up. I mean, just not good. But that's life. Not a happy day, but it has to be done sometimes. All right, 5 is make clarity the goal. Okay, so we're going to try and understand the other person from their side, because often our perception of what's going on is totally different than the person on the other side. So communicating back and forth in a calm, reserved way so that you can find out what they're feeling and why they're feeling the way they are and why their opinion is so strong about it. So we just need to put ourselves in their shoes, find empathy, and then once we've actually both had a chance to talk, and often when Tim was teaching me how to have conflict, because I never had conflict before, I wasn't allowed. When he was teaching me how, he would say, okay, you've got 2 minutes, tell me exactly what you're feeling and I promise not to interrupt. That was all well and good. I got to say my piece, I got to lay out all my things. And then he said, okay, now I'm gonna talk for 2 minutes and you can't interrupt. So I'll tell you, it was the hardest thing because he'd start to say his point and I needed to interrupt because I had to make sure that he understood me better, right? Because it was all about me. All I wanted was him to understand me, but I didn't want to understand his point of view. So that was we had to really learn about that one because that was natural for me. I wanted to make sure that he got my opinion because mine mattered the most. So yeah, we have to make clarity the goal. 6, we can do some role playing. We often will do that if we have time. I mean, this one is a long class. We only have an hour and a half in our REACT program in the mornings. If we have time at the end, we'll actually do some role playing. And people love it. Well, the extroverts love it. The extroverts love it because we can because we'll pick a scenario that they're really familiar with. And so many of them they're aware of just kind of the same things, right? Relationships and all that kind of stuff. So we'll do some role playing. And the funny thing is that the people who are sitting watching, they're going, oh yeah, I was that person at one point, and then I used to do the perspective from the other person. And so it's a really good tool if you have extra time to work through everybody's opinion on it.
Do they ever get triggered in the midst of that, where they actually becomes real? You ever had that?
I've never had that.
Okay.
Brent, have you ever had anything like that happen?
Okay.
Because it's a safe environment,
Okay.
right? Yes, I can see how they would get triggered with that anger and the issue that they're dealing with, but I haven't actually seen that happen.
Okay, that's good.
Yes, Maggie?
But I was just thinking that you're not probably role playing with the person you have the conflict with. You
No.
probably call a trusted friend and
Right.
say, can
Yes.
we talk this through?
Yes.
Yeah, I would think that, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
And-
Yeah, you're not role playing with the actual person you have the problem with.
Hence, when I was young, my mom used to have this saying when she was well, and she always used to say, sleep on it, always sleep on it, always sleep on it. You know, that
Right.
old-fashioned kind
Yes,
of thing.
yeah.
Now that I look at this, I'm thinking, whoa, you would need some time
Yeah,
to
yeah.
sleep on it. But
Yeah.
yeah, because the role playing that we did the last time when I was
Yeah.
at the last class, I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Did that help?
Yeah, it really did.
Did it?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah.
That was a really
In
good
therapy, there's something called the empty chair, right? So that
Oh,
we
yes.
do that empty chair thing, which is a similar to kind of.
Do you want to
role playing.
explain it for people who don't know?
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not an expert in it by any means, and jump in. Mac, you might know this better than I
Go
do,
ahead.
but the empty chair,
Talk
and
an empty
anybody
chair.
else who's therapist. But the empty chair is literally in the counseling session. You would just put in an empty chair, and then you would help somebody have a conversation with maybe their mom or somebody that they're having a conflict with, and just for that very reason of being able to see all of the different points of view, and sometimes you get somebody to actually change into the other chair, which helps them.
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. So
Quite helpful.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is really helpful. It's kind of powerful.
Yeah, it is. All right, number 7 is pick your battles. When we get into learning about how to deal with conflict, we are looking for a conflict that we can practice on, right? So every little thing that comes up, all of a sudden you're going to make it into a conflict so you can sort through all these new tools that you're learning. Our advice to clients is don't pick your battles. Pick your battles. We're not going to deal with the little ones at this point until you're really good at it and while you understand the whole concept. Some of these things, you're just going to have to let slide. Some of the conflicts that come up, because then you're going to be, Brittany's friend actually, the one that just from Winnipeg who had lots of complex trauma, she got married and all of a sudden she was picking battles over every little thing her brand new husband did. They just got married. And he came to Tim and he says, I'm exhausted. We have 6 or 7 conflicts a day and we're newly married. We shouldn't be doing this. So Tim, of course, has been counseling this other woman and just sitting down saying, sometimes you have to let a lot of these things go. You're going to, over your married life of 40 years, you're going to deal with them all. It doesn't have to be in the first 2 months. So sometimes you have to just let some of them go. This is just a basic one. Avoid emails and texts. Because there's so much misunderstandings when it comes to just doing it through written word, texting and email each other, and then the conflict arises because they're not getting what's being said and they're freaking out about things, and we just really try to tell people don't do that.
Yeah, accidentally caps lock them.
Yeah.
The wrong
Stop yelling. Oh. And number 9, another tool is to write it out.
Or Facebook. I got big thumbs, so I scroll
Yeah.
and I have a hit like the thumbs down.
Oh yeah. With an angry face.
I did not mean to do
How fast
that.
do you erase that?
I did that once. We have a React site that all our clients are on because they talk to each other during the day and stuff. And something bad happened and I accidentally pushed the sticking your tongue out one emoji. And I didn't notice until somebody says, why did you stick your tongue out at whatever her name was? I'm like, no! And then I had to write out, I'm sorry, that was a mistake. I was supposed to do the other one. Yeah. Anyway, write it out and run it by a trusted person to see if it's an appropriate response to a conflict. That's really helpful. So let's just quickly go over and then we'll have another break. Then the last little part there is conflict and attitude. All right, so number 1 of all things is humility. Now remember, when we've got all these clients, they don't know anything about healthy conflict. So when we start talking about, the healthy ways to resolve conflict and the attitude underneath, they really, this is all basic information. They don't get it at all. So I need to look at myself honestly and see what part I play in the conflict. I need to have respect. So we're not going to stoop to all the nasty things that we used to do in the old way of life. The name calling, the making sure we're putting the other person down. We have to remember to respect and love the other person. 3 is forgiveness. And Mike sent me 4 videos of a woman talking about the brain chemistry and the forgiveness and stuff. We're talking about resentments on Monday, so we're actually going to deal with that. I'm going to finish and find out possibly some new tools to work with for forgiveness. So holding resentments you're going to find is very damaging to the person holding them, less to the person that you're mad at. So forgiveness is a huge key. Number 4, honesty and love. And again, it's not what you want to say, it's how you say it in a lot of ways. So we need to make sure that they're feeling validated and loved and cared for while we're confronting. And trust. We have to work at rebuilding trust. Trust just doesn't happen when we decide it's time. It takes a lot of time. And people have to process and deal with some of the emotions that they're dealing with. So trust is a process. So we're going to take another break and then move on to anger and emotions. Yay. Unless we want to do some role playing to start off with. We're going to start talking about emotions and anger. Now, Tim did talk about it a little bit one day when he was here. Now, that was the phase 2 stuff, and it was a little bit in depth and lots of kind of bunny trails that they go on. But we need to go back and just talk about anger in a basic way. Again, people who come out of complex trauma, they've learned 3 rules in their life. Don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel. So now we have a whole bunch of people, clients coming into our program who don't know how to feel. They literally have no emotions other than the happy or the, those kind of things that they're allowed to feel as happy, but they're not aware of any of the other emotions. They know that dad was allowed to be angry, but nobody else was allowed to be angry. So they've shut themselves down, just totally numbed and avoided all the feelings that have come up. And so we're going to talk about the real basics of anger. So, our first title here is the results of this don't feel rule. So this is going to help us as counselors and teachers to understand the people that come in with complex trauma, how they are because they've never learned how to feel. So that's our heading. The first thing that happens is they have trust issues. So their parents, of course, it was like that child jumping off the roof. They've learned that they cannot trust other people. So they come into our program and they don't know how to trust, and that builds over time. But they have to be aware that they have trust issues so that they can look at it honestly. So again, there's often double standards when the mom and dad are allowed to be angry, but the children are not. So they've stuffed that. Stuffing is the second one. They've stuffed their emotions. And we keep learning how much that affects us emotionally, physically, spiritually, and mentally. So a lot of the mental health issues come out of not being aware of our emotions. The physical, the videos that I've been watching, I believe it said 98% of cancers are related to this emotional, we call it emotional anorexia. Our clients don't know how to feel. So a lot of these physical health issues, cancer and depression and all those things, come out of not being able to feel, and it changes us on a molecular level. That's what I'm learning this weekend. So it's unbelievable what's happening. This neuroscientist is talking about, Karen Leaf, yeah, you've heard about her. Okay.
Yeah, she's talking about 75 to 98%.
78 to 98%, okay. Yeah, so it's unbelievable how much it affects us if we stuff our emotions. Third thing happens is we don't feel safe in our family environment. So we don't feel safe so that we can't share anything about ourselves. We can't be ourselves. We have to always wear that happy mask that, we're allowed to be happy, but we can't feel any of the other emotions because that's all either beat out of us or discouraged or we're punished for it. The other thing that happens is it blocks self-awareness. So, emotions are a God-given thing. They're meant to teach us what is wrong in our life that we can deal with. But if we block all the emotions, then all those God-given emotions in our lives, they're not working. So if there's something that violates love or justice or respect, we should get angry about that. And so that's, in turn, a way that we can heal the situation and can resolve the conflict. But if we can't feel anger, then we have no resources or even an understanding of how to fix the world around us. Number 5 is it blocks intimacy. So if we're raised with we don't trust, we don't talk, we don't feel, having an intimate relationship is pretty much impossible, because if you can't be who you are, then the other person can't get to know the real you. They only get to know the person in the masks and the image that they've projected. So intimacy is impossible. 6, it adds to shame about who we are. Adds to the shame about who we are. So we're not able to accept ourselves because that huge part of our emotional world, our mental world, we're not even aware of, we don't know about it. So we kind of feel that that's got to be a shameful thing to feel those emotions. So if you feel embarrassment for something that you've done, all of a sudden you feel that shame because I don't want to feel the embarrassment. And embarrassment was a huge thing for me growing up. If something happened, and I remember tucking my skirt into some underwear when I was wearing a skirt, and I walked and somebody saw me and came and told me, and humiliation. I actually had to leave work and go home. I was an adult because the shame was so overwhelming that I had done that, and it was an embarrassment. So at that point, I of course realized that I couldn't feel shame, so I had to pretend that it didn't exist. So it denied all my emotions and how I was feeling. 7, I'm going to put this in shadow self. So your shadow self, you can't look at your shadow self. Your shadow self is the person in that kind of far reaches of your imagination or your thoughts that you can't look at. It's in the shadows. You don't really know who's over there. You don't know what your feelings are because you've been denying it all your life. So you have to pretend that your shadow doesn't exist. It's there, but because we don't want to look at anything that's not happy and joyful and all that, all the good emotions, we have to pretend that that's not there, and so we can't even believe that I have a shadow. That's what that one means. Number 8. We discard parts of who we are because we don't want the negative consequences that go along with it. So especially if we were ridiculed for having emotions, ridiculed for being, a sensitive child, we don't want to feel that way. We don't like that negative feeling, the uncomfortable feelings of being put down and made fun of, laughed at. So those are all negative consequences, so we have to try and shut that down so that we don't feel it anymore. So these are all issues. All our clients, most of our clients that come in are feeling all these things. So that's why a lot of the treatment centers aren't working, because they're not aware of all this. They think that they can counsel people on, like you guys, a lot of you guys are counselors. These are not your average person. You can counsel with all the tools that you've learned from schooling and university and stuff, but when we come to addictions, these people are coming in like aliens. We have to learn how different they are, and it's just a very scary thing when you realize we have to change how we view people from addictions. It's totally different. Any comments on that? Okay. 9 is denial. So denial becomes our mode of living. We detach from our emotions. We don't want to form good bonds with people, because to make intimate relationships, we have to start breaking down the walls and trusting them and talking about how we're feeling and what our thoughts are. And if that's a shameful thing for us to have those kind of emotions, we have to be in denial that we're those kind of people. And so that really blocks intimacy, because we can't have those kind of intimate relationships. I'm gonna have to go up. I can't reach down any lower.
Make the floor taller.
Yeah, I wish I could. I don't think we can. That's all right. All right, number 10. We become emotionally unavailable. So you look at relationships where one person is going through a difficult time and the other person has complex trauma. they really don't know how to support and work with somebody else who's having some issues, some troubles that they're dealing with, or some depression, mental health issues, because they don't know what that looks like. So to ask somebody to go and be a support person to somebody else when they don't know what their emotions are and they're unavailable, they don't know how to do it. So that's a really difficult thing when they come into treatment and they start learning about all their emotions and stuff, and then their partner or somebody close to them has an issue that needs support, they don't know what to do. So they're really at a loss. 11, we fear rejection and shame. If we do show these emotions, we fear that we're gonna, of course, if we had that in childhood, we're made fun of. If we show embarrassment or any of the other things, we're afraid that if we show that, we're gonna be humiliated again, we're gonna feel that rejection. And it's just, again, all these uncomfortable emotions that we were taught growing up not to feel. So we don't want to sit in the uncomfortable, we just run away and try to block and avoid it. 12, it leads to dishonesty in all my relationships. Because if I can't be real who I am, and if I say, oh yeah, nothing's bothering me, I'm fine, when it really is, again, that just sets you up for dishonesty, and then the person starts to stop trusting you because you're not being honest with how you really are. So the relationships are built on dishonesty, a phony intimacy, fake intimacy. And 13, we need advice. To keep all those emotions quiet, we need to distract all the process addictions that we talked about, the shopping, the gaming, the sports, all the things that we need. We need something so that we don't have to feel. So these are all the things that are going on inside of a person who comes into treatment and is not even aware that they have emotions.
I've seen this, I saw this a lot when I was working in a recovery house.
Yeah, I bet.
Really a lot.
Yeah. It's pretty common.
And many masks.
Yes.
I'll see how good I'm doing. I'm doing good.
Yeah.
You know.
And they're not. Yeah. Absolutely. All right, so let's go over to this cycle over here. It's the addiction cycle. But Tim has actually developed it so that he took the addiction cycle and then put it into an anger addiction cycle, because often they're connected in some way. So if you look at number 1 there, the honeymoon stage. Honeymoon is over here. So everything's going well, we're in a relationship. It could be not just an intimate relationship, but good friends, co-workers, extended family. So it starts here, but it starts off with an unmet need or an unresolved conflict or resentment. So everything can be going well, and then something happens so that somebody's either emotionally unavailable for you, or your needs aren't being met, and we start to talk about it, but we're not sure how to deal with it. So what the person does is they go into their old behavior to try to get their needs met. So they start to manipulate the other person. They start to drop hints that they need them to do something for them. We give them the silent treatment, so they know something's wrong, my needs aren't being met, maybe they can read my mind and just jump in and try and fill the problem, make it work, or they can start blaming somebody for something that's not really the issue. So all these things start to happen at the very beginning of the cycle, okay? So we've gone to the old behavior, and we've realized that it's not working anymore for whatever reason. The other person could be getting healthier, or they could be just getting tired of your stuff, and they start not being manipulated anymore. They don't, jump in to fix you to try and make everything okay. So we get to this stage down here where it's not working, and so the person is very confused. It's always worked in the past. I've learned how to manipulate like a master. All of a sudden it's not working anymore. So they're frustrated, they're confused, and very, very quickly it turns to anger. So now we're down here at the anger. So We can't feel fear, we can't feel pain, we can't feel anxiety, so anger is the emotion that we go to. Then we get this sense of powerlessness, because I'm not able to manipulate and control to get my needs met in an unhealthy way. It's not working, so I feel powerless, and immediately or very quickly after the powerlessness feeling, you get a release of the rage. So there's a blow up, there's a screaming match, there's abuse of any kind, something terrible happens. But as we've talked about before in the other cycle, the cycle of conflict, there's a release of the emotions. So okay, the abuse has happened, there's a release of the emotions, and the pressure building up has released, but then the guilt comes. What have I done? I've hurt you, I'm so sorry, I'll never do it again. How many times do I have to say that? I'll go get help, I'll go into therapy, all that kind of stuff. And so the honeymoon starts again. So a couple of things to note about all that is that at any stage in these points, it can trigger into addiction. So if a need is not met or there's unresolved resentments, you can go into addiction, numb and avoid. If your old behaviors aren't working, you don't feel like you're being heard, you go into addiction. The frustration and confusion of not being able to do what you used to do to get it to work, they're not responding to your manipulation, into addiction. Anger, feeling powerless, release of rage, and then guilt. All those things at any point can lead to back into the addiction. So what we need to again notice from, it's interesting that we did the conflict one before that, the cycle gets shorter and shorter and shorter. So eventually this old cycle starts going on, and as it goes around and around faster and faster, the honeymoon stage actually disappears and there's no honeymoon stage anymore. They go right from the guilt into this sense that my needs aren't being met, so it's okay to be angry, and then they go through the cycle again. So it's kind of can everybody understand how that happens? You can see where all that anger and stuff goes. The problem is the anger, and we talked about that before with the cycle of conflict. More layers are going to be added on, and the anger gets deeper and stronger, and then eventually relapse happens.
So
Yes,
the guilt then fortifies the shame.
Yeah. 4 to 5, anger and, we don't want to feel shame. Often when we're in the addiction cycle, we don't want to feel the shame, so anger is easier.
Right, but then because of the guilt, you get where
Guilt up here to the shame, yeah, because we've heard people when we've exploded and released the anger, we feel guilt, we feel shame about it, but we're not comfortable feeling shame, so we have to go back into the next, we have to avoid it and numb it. Yeah. Not happy about shame. All right, so let's talk about breaking the cycle here. All right, so breaking the cycle, the first thing we need to do is identify the triggers. Okay, so why do I get so angry? Why is this all happening? We need to identify what makes us crazy. My trigger is disrespect, and I've said that before. The minute I feel disrespect, either real or perceived, as soon as I feel it, I'm triggered into this anger. I can go right to anger, because I know how to do anger. So yeah, identifying the triggers. We can start writing an anger log. So we get to learn, who do I get angry with? Why do I get angry? When? I hate to say this out loud, but that time of the month, those emotions are still there, at least for me. And I need to know if that's part of the process where I just am irritable and uncomfortable and I can't deal with stuff. Where am I? Is it when I'm at work or when I'm with my friends? What kind of thing? So we can start writing down the anger log. Now we're going to go through all the healthy, oh yes, go ahead.
I just want to check in really quickly.
Yeah.
I think I would go, I have anxiety first, serious anxiety about
Okay.
something. And
Yeah.
then, because that will absolutely create all the behaviors, all the
Okay.
panic situations, anything, if someone
Yeah.
mad at me, oh my gosh, it's someone's fault, everything else.
Yeah.
And then then I'll use anger to
Cover that.
cover that up, because it's just such a terrifying place to be.
yes,
Because
yes.
I honestly feel like I'm like 2 or 3 years old, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So would an anxiety log be helpful?
Britt, can you help me out on that one? Probably. So would it be with unmet needs, when you feel that you're not, your needs aren't being met and you're panicking a little bit, anxiety over that?
No.
Or is it more here?
No, the thing that would trigger me would always be other centered. Because I'm responsible for everybody's, I must have done something, right?
Right,
So,
right.
and then I can create a cycle though,
Yes.
that will take me to a honeymoon place.
Which is very similar to this one?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
just because I can't stand the thought that I've done something.
Right,
I
right.
don't know what it is.
And the shame all comes in. And
Right, I can make up 15 reasons that I'm sure that might be it.
Right, right.
Start to believe them all, and then
Yeah.
that's gonna affect my behaviors.
Yes, yes, yes. So Britt, did you want to comment on that?
I mean, I think there's definitely value in a anxiety log and just understanding that part of it, because obviously that's a big aspect of it.
Actually, each 4 of these breaking the cycle could be used in that scenario.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd look at all 4 of these,
Yeah.
identify what's
Yeah.
causing that trigger and to get a log and identify patterns. All 4 of those I think could be used under that scenario from my
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Identifying the patterns. What are you feeling at that time and why is it going that way for you is really important. And then 4, take healthy action. Yeah. Okay, so that being if you're identifying some patterns, that it's cyclicals or there's the emotions involved, I'm tired, I'm frustrated with my kids. So you're gonna have to learn self-care. And again, next week we're gonna talk about self-care, the basics of self-care. Just learning how to make sure that I set limits on time with certain people, because that's gonna trigger me into my anger or my anxiety. Medications for physical illnesses, but something that we always have to be aware of when we're talking to our clients is most doctors don't understand addiction. Like we just went through all those sheets, right, beforehand about the, the results of the don't feel rule. People don't have emotions when they're absorbed in addictions. So doctors, all they can see is the physical. So if they're not aware of all that other stuff, then they're not going to be that much help. So we actually have one doctor in Winnipeg who's very, very aware of the addiction cycle and all the complex trauma stuff underneath. So we actually push people to go and see them. So not a lot of them out there that actually understand it. Okay? So with all this, we have to remember that progress is slow. Sorry, Wendy. Yeah, progress is slow. It takes 2 to 10 years to rewire the brain to change those circuits in the brain. Now, I say that because it took me 10 years just because I was so stubborn and self-righteous. I didn't think I had a problem. So it took me a good 10 years to rewire my brain. But it doesn't have to take that long if you have an attitude of, humility and grace and respect and stuff. It doesn't have to take that long, but it's not going to happen in a week or a month. It does take a long time. So again, people from complex trauma, that nanosecond response, sometimes we just have to take a breath, take a step back, like you were saying, Cherry. We'll deal with that at a different time, but it takes time to retrain the brain, but it does work. It does happen. So self-awareness is the key. Dysfunctional families don't teach us about self-awareness. We were not allowed to have any needs, so we didn't really understand it. So it takes time, and it can be a messy pattern. Messy. Now we're gonna go on the healthy ways to handle anger at the end of our program, but this is just kind of basics right now. Or at the end of our day. Yeah, we will get there. Okay, so the causes of anger, and I'm starting to lose that pen. How unfortunate. All right, so our common causes of anger. One, depression.
Wow.
Yeah. When you're you're depressed, it's easy to lash out at other people, for sure. 2 is fatigue. So that can be physical or emotional. Now, we have all been dealing with lots of stuff in our own life. We're working through some of our issues, and we're getting mentally exhausted. Jim tells me he has to sleep a couple extra hours a night. Like, it's just overwhelming at times. So we have to make sure that we're getting lots of rest, we're dealing with it, we're doing self-care, and we're going to talk about that a little bit next week. Trauma is an obvious cause of anger. Something's happened and then we just explode. It's our natural response to something bad that's happened. 4 is grief. Especially from complex trauma, we don't want to grieve because we're afraid it's going to take us out, so we can get angry instead. 5 is hormonal changes. We had a lovely Christian woman when Tim and I were at a church in Winnipeg. We pastored at that church for 10 years, and she was the most crotchety, cantankerous woman I've ever met. Just a miserable, miserable woman when we first started pastoring there. But some people took us aside, the elders took us aside and said, she used to be the sweetest woman you'd ever want to meet. And then she went through her change of life and just became a totally different person. Now, in hindsight, this was all before we understood about complex trauma. She had tons of complex trauma in her life. But she went from being very, very sweet to being very crotchety, and she died a crotchety woman. So unfortunately, she probably should have gone to get some kind of help from a therapist, or obviously from a therapist or somebody who understood complex trauma, or just some medications to help her, because obviously it was a chemical. Something chemically went wrong in her brain, because it totally changed her. But it can cause a lot of anger, a lot of upset with her family, so it's very terrible. 6 would be stress. Especially in early recovery, we often don't understand what stress does to us. And in early recovery, when we're feeling good and we're feeling motivated, we say yes to all these different things. And then we have to start doing all the things that we've promised, and it's just overwhelming. There's too much to do. So we're unable to cope, and it just makes us angry and lash out at everybody. 7 would be feeling threatened or in danger. So anger, in a healthy way, triggers the fight, flight, freeze response. And that's what it's supposed to do. But any kind of danger, and because we don't know how to deal with all that stress and anger, it shuts us down. Right? Feeling violated, or love is violated. And we talk about that love. We talk about that a lot. Anytime where love is violated, there's anytime love, justice, truth, or respect is violated, anger, and that's the healthy response. We're supposed to do that so that we can change the situation or the people around us that we love. And 9, anger was needed to survive. So I've listed down there how anger was needed to survive as a child, so we had to protect ourselves from being hurt. We had to compensate for the weak emotions that we had because we didn't feel that we had a right to have them all. And it was to create boundaries. When we don't understand, and we talked about boundaries last week, if we don't understand boundaries, then, and we don't know how to set them and keep them, the anger will just make the boundary for us, and then they will stay away and not come close to us. So that was what we needed to survive. So in complex trauma, the only option we had was to stuff down the emotion, but healthy anger is okay. It's needed when love is violated, but we just don't understand that. 10, unrealistic expectations. So we've already talked about that. That's another cause. And 11 is selfishness. How many times do we get angry because I can't get my way? All right, so those are our basic causes of anger.
Can I add 2 more?
Yes, you sure can. I gotta get my pen ready, just wait.
Nutrition.
Nutrition, okay.
So some people are just set off by some kind of foods, or if you're not consuming the right kind of foods.
Right, right.
And a lot of that has to do with like vitamins and
Yeah,
minerals. If you're
yeah.
deficient,
I can add that to her.
that'll make a huge impact on you.
Yeah.
The other thing is stimulation. Some people have a hard time with overstimulation.
Overstimulation,
or
yeah.
certain
I
types
would
of
add
stimulation.
that one as well, yeah.
And we talked about that before with the sensitivities
Yes.
that people get from complex trauma.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, thank you, that's great. Those are 2 extra ones for sure. All right, let's move on to the challenges in dealing with anger. Put the pen down first. Okay, so there are, some of this is going to seem a little bit like review, but we're putting them kind of in different categories here. So there are hundreds of triggers and a nanosecond to pause and not react, which is very difficult. So anger has lots of roles in our life, okay? So the first thing it does, anger, is it gives us energy. We know that sense of the adrenaline rush and the anger, we have that. I wrote down in there, we can vacuum the house with vengeance, right? I think somebody over here said that one. I'm gonna vacuum because that air gives us energy. It actually feels good, and that's where we can actually get addicted to it because it gives us energy to do lots of things. That's right. What was that comment?
Said whoever called it the dirt devil was capitalism.
That's great. Yeah, I love that. Oh, goodness. Yeah. It allows us to stay in control. And the point of that is nobody's going to poke an angry bear, right? So they're going to stay away, we're going to get our boundaries up, our walls up. They are not going to annoy us. 3, it's the main way to not get hurt again. Again, it keeps people at a distance. They're not going to confront me if I'm known as being an angry person. It's going to keep them far away, and I'm not going to get hurt because again, everything's all about staying safe. Yep. I don't have to feel. I don't have to expose any of these weak emotions. So fear or embarrassment. Think about somebody who's got complex trauma and they trip and they fall and they're embarrassed, right? What do? They get up and yell at somebody who left something in the way. I've seen that happen. Anger is easier to feel than embarrassment because embarrassment can take you out. 5, it's a way to hurt other people. So if I lash out at somebody, often my ulterior motive is I want to hurt them. I want to make sure that they know that I'm upset at them. So we say things to hurt them and we lash out at them. And in some twisted, sick way, it makes us feel better because now they're feeling the fear and pain and rejection as well as I am, so I'm not the only one in pain. So I wrote that little phrase down, hurt people. Very true. 6, it's my piece of identity. It's my identity. That's a D. It's my identity. So we have a lot of people, street people, I would suspect it's very similar here as it is in Winnipeg. The people on the street have to have an angry persona because then they gain respect. People won't bug them, they won't steal from them if they're angry.
It's a way to stay safer.
It's a way to stay safer, yeah. You put on that anger facade and you're a little safer. And then street gangs and stuff. We have tons of street gangs in Winnipeg. I don't know if you guys have a lot of them. Any? Not a lot of gangs? Yeah, our Winnipeg North End
We're
is
driving by.
just huge.
Yeah, they're not down in this area.
Oh,
They
okay.
exist, but not
Different-
necessarily right.
Different spots, yeah.
Generally, right.
Yeah, so you don't have to deal with that a lot, but
There's a lot of youth gangs, I think.
youth gangs, yeah, yeah. We have a lot of different nationality gangs, so the Filipinos and the Native Americans.
And we have people who kind of isolate as a way of saying something.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah, that's a different approach. But anger can definitely
That's
give
sort
them,
of real fun.
yes, for sure. 7. It's the way of saying that I don't need anyone. It isolates me. So I say that I don't need anybody and it isolates me, but what it does is make me more miserable. So I can be angry, but then I end up being more lonely in the long run. 8, I can avoid being honest. So if I'm angry, it's always somebody else's fault. So I can avoid being honest with who I am and my mistakes that I've made and stuff, because I can put it out there and let other people take the blame for all my problems. 9, facing issues. And we've done all of this stuff already. For example, if I'm disorganized, live a chaotic life due to lack of planning and discipline, I'm going to have lots of anger issues because my place is going to be a mess and I'm not going to be able to find anything and my life is going to be in chaos. Well, until I start dealing with some of the issues of being disorganized and undisciplined, then anger will just cover for it. It's not going to be a problem. So if I'm not dealing with resentments and I'm not finding forgiveness, I can use anger to cover that, but unless I start dealing with that issue, it's always going to keep coming back, the anger. If I don't deal with the wounds from my childhood, and that's what we've talked about for 5 weeks, we're going to just have lots of anger. We don't take care of myself, and I remain in an unhealthy relationship, an abusive relationship. Lots of anger comes from that, but I haven't learned how to stand up for myself and make boundaries, so I'm going to have to just live in that lifestyle until I start facing the issues. But anger makes it so I don't have to. I'm going to put number 10 over here. We have no boundaries or poor boundaries. So I feel powerless to say no to somebody or anyone. I've got no boundaries. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to end up getting angry at everybody, and that'll make them push the boundary back, and then they won't bug me anymore. So if I don't have boundaries or I have very poor boundaries, eventually you're going to be taken advantage of and used, and then you explode in anger and people back off and stop asking you for things or asking for your help. But again, it isolates you. Number 11, communication. So I don't learn to communicate my needs and desires in a healthy way. I just, anger can just be that way of making me communicate because I don't have boundaries and I don't know how to do things without hurting other people. So communication is, anger is a role in our communication. I just blast and blow up, and of course everybody does what I say when I'm angry and yelling at them. Of course they do. So that's what we use for our communication, because I don't know how to do it in a healthy way, so I communicate poorly.
Can I go back to the number 10?
Absolutely.
Isn't the anger in regards to no boundaries or poor boundaries more of an anger against yourself for not putting up those boundaries?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, the very good connection. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how to do it in a healthy way. So yeah, I'm going to blow up and then anger towards myself because I can't do it.
Right.
And then people keep crossing my boundaries and I don't know how to set them properly, don't know how to push them back, so I explode and then there's all that guilt.
And then the communication part comes in because you don't communicate.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So then of course I feel shame because I don't know how to do that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then the anger just covers all that. I don't have to deal with any of that shame and fears because I'll just get angry. Yeah. And 12 would be, again, unrealistic expectations. Again, that was on the last list, but expectations. Okay? So we just expect other people to know what we need and want, and so if they don't, we get angry. That can just be a way of making it all better. All right. Again, we're going to do a couple more lists. What time are we getting at? Oh yeah, we're good. We'll be. Oh, do we need a break?
Yep.
Yes. Let's have a break. A program where we can start looking at some of the stuff, accepting, acknowledging it, dealing with it, and moving on. So it's a process, but often people who come into our program are even in denial that they have any anger. In fact, we had one woman about must have been over a month ago because I've been here over a month. But she came into our program. She was a lovely Christian lady, middle-aged, sweet and kind as can be. And she said, I don't have any anger. Well, eventually, she was just exploding with anger with all the abuse that had happened in her past that she had denied that even existed. And then, of course, she started to have realization that, yeah, I guess I shouldn't have been abused that way, you know. She thought that was all normal. Her families were all raised that way. So that was normal to her, and then she found out that she was abused, and all the anger came out. So she kind of laughs about it now because she's already graduated, but she laughs about it now because she had no idea she was an angry person. It just comes out. So addiction also masks all our feelings. And the whole reason we use addictions, process addictions, drugs, alcohol, anything like that, the whole reason we use it is because that helps to numb all our feelings. So we don't have to go there. So, you know, you've seen the progression, you know, when something is ready to explode, and so we fight, flight, freeze before it even happens. We have learned to start to feel out when something negative is coming, and we fight, flight, freeze, or go into our addiction so that we don't have to feel anything negative. The third reason is we've had unhealthy role models. In our home. So we were never allowed to express anger. Anger was used to control us. So we weren't allowed to have that. So we now, as we grow up, if we were controlled by anger, an outburst from mom or dad, then we think that we can use that in an unhealthy way. And that's what we learned. And then blaming others is used as a technique to divert any attention that's coming to us, something that we have to change. We can quickly use anger to divert it a different way, so that's another unhealthy way of coping, but we can blame everybody else for our problems. And we get a lot of clients coming into our program who are the victims. They've got victim mentality. They've got all these horrible things that happened. Yes, they were horrible things that happened. But all they do is blame other people, and they never take any ownership on how they responded to it. So it's very much a victim mentality. Any questions on that?
But the last part you said is really key, about taking ownership of your response.
Response, because all we can do is respond, right? Yeah, we can't control, that's what that lady said on our video. We can't control all the circumstances in our life, but we can control, in that moment, how we're going to respond to it. So we can take that right to God to heal us, to help us to move on, and then deal with all the emotions underneath that come. All right, the next little list we have here, before we get into healthy and unhealthy responses to anger, is the impact of substance abuse on anger. So these are our clients that we're talking about. They've been using process addiction, drugs, alcohol, doing all that stuff. So the impact of abuse, substance abuse, I'll put substance abuse. Substance abuse. On anger. So the first thing that happens is we become overly aggressive when we're angry. So when normies, what we call normies, when normies get angry, there's a response, anything that violates love, justice, respect, They can come in and in a very healthy way, diffuse the anger, talk about the conflict, resolve everything. That's a healthy model. When we get angry, if we've got complex trauma, we're overly aggressive. We can yell and scream and physically push people and all that kind of stuff. So we have no boundaries. We don't understand that we are not allowed to put our hands on anybody. We're not allowed to emotionally, verbally abuse other people because we don't have those kind of self-boundaries. Remember we talked about internal boundaries? I will never do this. I will never do this. We often don't have that, so we feel that we can just let go and do whatever we want. So we have no self-control and no boundaries. Second thing is threats of harm. So what happens is when we become angry and we've not been aware of all our emotions, that anger is so intense that we have always felt powerless, and so now we're going to start getting out our anger in an unhealthy way. So it's very, very intense because we've never felt that we had any power. So now that we're adults and starting to lash out, we know that we can threaten other people with our physical actions. 3, we can use emotional blackmail. To punish someone. So we have the silent treatment, we play mind games and ignore other people. So what we're doing is our twisted thinking, we get this twisted thinking, and we need to disrespect others. So we need to put them down and blackmail them in that sense. So that's what happens when we haven't learned any of those healthy rules for anger and emotions, is we think that we can twist whatever we can, and there's your gaslighting again, to make them the bad guy. So we don't want to take ownership on our own. We seek revenge. I watched a Netflix show and it was about 15 sessions on, and it was called Revenge. And so this girl, something terrible had happened to her, and she spent her entire life,
I love that show.
10 years. Yeah, I know, right? It was so cool. It was one of my first Netflix shows. She spent the entire season, or I don't know how many seasons now, it was a long time ago, plotting her revenge. And it was all very carefully orchestrated so that at the very end, this guy was in deep trouble for what he did for her years ago. I mean, it was fascinating to follow all the progressions and stuff. But when we don't know how to deal with anger, we don't know how to deal with our complex trauma, revenge is a very common thing with our clients. That's what they've learned to do. Yeah, Kathy?
And I hear it so often.
Yeah.
Oh, that guy owes me money, he hasn't paid me. He's gonna get it.
Yeah.
And I wonder, well, does he really owe you money, number one? Because this reality is kind of distorted.
Yes.
And what somebody actually remembers, is kind of always a little bit suspect.
Yeah.
But, and I'm also thinking, are you gonna remember this in 5 minutes?
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
Because the anger comes and it is really aggressive and it's really forceful.
Yeah.
But often it dissipates really fast. I don't know if anybody else has noticed that.
To do another boot, just
Yes. And I thought,
The anger-
yeah, you don't like the situation, wait 5 minutes.
Yeah.
another distraction comes along.
Yes.
Yeah,
Distraction.
That's why,
Exactly.
The anger will be deflected, but they will always remember a drug debt. Drug debts never get forgiven. Never forget about a drug debt if somebody owes you.
I think one of the most horrific things I learned sitting out here was when I'd see a woman with a shaved head. And I think,
Oh, yes.
nice or what? And then I was told, no, there's drug debt. And that's just mortifying.
yeah, I saw that.
So
a
somebody
number of
did
times
that
in the
to her?
downtown east side, yes.
Yeah, somebody
You know what?
shaved
That's
their
quite
head.
common.
Yes. It's quite common.
Shave their hair if they have a drug that they can't
Yeah.
get.
Quite
The
common.
girls up and shave their head.
I saw one that was half done.
Oh, that might be the style.
I don't think so, it was a little bit too drastic.
Well, there is one lady out there who is.
No, this was in the downtown east side.
Oh, okay. Yeah. For me. Yeah, it's quite graphic, it's quite rude. But, yeah, like,
Revenge. So they
Yeah.
do tend to seek revenge. All right.
Misty?
So the last one is they block their angry feelings and avoid the true source of their anger. So they can blow up at somebody, but it's actually not that person that they're angry at. But it's usually a person that they have a closer relationship with. They blow up at them because they're angry at that person over there. It's transference, they just don't know how to deal with it, they don't know how to resolve conflict. So the way that they get out, it's a release of the tension, release of that anxiety, is to blow up at somebody else. So that's one of the other things that happens. All right, we are moving on to unhealthy ways of dealing with anger, and then we're gonna switch and do the healthy ways of dealing with anger. And those are our last two, and it's just about the right perfect time.
Just a quick comment.
Yes, please.
On the abuse, it really depends a lot too on how high a person is and what they're high on.
Yes, yes.
If somebody's really high on ice, and you can taser them and taser them and taser them, they'll never go down.
No kidding. Yeah. Ooh, goodness. All right. All right, the unhealthy ways of dealing with anger. The first one is explode. Okay, so we yell, we scream, we threaten, we hit, we throw things across the room. That's the exploder. We're all probably aware of people who are that way. It's just kind of their go-to thing. That's what they do. They explode. Every day. Yeah. Two is the stuffer. And that's the other extreme. And we've talked about this many times. When somebody is a stuffer and they don't know what to do with their anger, they stuff it down, and that's where your physical, mental, spiritual, emotional self becomes damaged. So that comes into a lot of health problems and emotional problems, mental health issues. It's all from stuffing down the anger that they don't know what to do with. Headaches, that was another one that we haven't talked about. Number 3 is the self-punisher. And I think, Wendy, you talked about that. I wrote on the side, this is anger turned inward. So this is your self-punisher. So if something goes wrong, we believe it's our fault. That's exactly what you were talking about. We failed so much that we don't deserve a good life. People actually feel that way. It results in deeper self-hatred, mentally beating ourselves up, self-harm, punishing ourselves, and sabotaging anything that's good. That's how a lot of people deal with their anger, because they don't know what to do with it in a healthy way. 4 is the manipulative person. Underhanded person. And the passive aggressive. And that's probably the most common, is this one. They find different ways that have worked as different ways that have worked as they've grown up. So they've learned how to manipulate, they've learned how to lie, they've learned how to do all the things. And sarcasm, again, is anger disguised to not look like anger. That's, again, that sarcasm thing. So they're being passive aggressive. They're saying what they want to say about their anger, but trying to say it in a joking way. So it enables us to deny that we're angry. So we can do all these other little tricks, the silent treatment, the pouting, one-word answers, pushing their buttons, showing up late just to annoy them, all those kind of things. So that's just another really big way of dealing with anger, and it seems to release some of the pressure inside, but it, of course, we know it never does. And then number 5 is to medicate. So those are all the unhealthy ways. Now, a couple notes on the bottom there is unhealthy expressions of anger usually turn into resentments. resentments. And Monday night, we're talking about resentments and how much it affects us physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. So that's one of the things. And how we express anger is learned. Again, that other list that we had no healthy role models for dealing with our anger. So that's what we learned, but it can be unlearned, and we can learn how to do that. Again, our brain, that neuroplasty, we have that in our brain where the brain keeps changing and growing. We can learn the new circuits and deal with anger in different ways. We just have to learn to stop that explosion, all the unhealthy ways. We need to stop it in that nanosecond, and that can happen. I'm a product of that. I've learned how to stop that anger and then learn to deal with it a different way. So it is doable. It just takes some time and some mistakes along the way. All right, now we're finally going to get to the healthy ways.
Just flip the page
Yes.
and you're just fine.
Yeah.
You're healthy.
Yeah, right. Yeah. All right. Healthy ways of dealing with anger. We're on our last page. We're going to do just right. All right, the first thing we want to learn how to do is to breathe and take a step back. Because when we have that nanosecond where we want to respond, 99.9% of the time, it's with something that's not appropriate. We want to say things that we really shouldn't say, but it's just part of that, all those chemicals going on our brain. We have to learn to take a breath and just kind of step back, even physically. You can teach yourself to physically step back, kind of calm your breathing down, calm your heart rate, do all that stuff. And then when you feel that you're in control again, then you can start talking about it and discussing things in a healthy way.
I often get angry because I always think, oh, I wish I'd said this. Why didn't I think of
Yeah.
that? And you know what? It's probably a good thing.
Yes, probably a good thing. 2, we have to try to communicate. And that's another tool that I knew nothing about because I was never allowed to confront anybody about anything, especially my family. So when Tim and I first got married, he had to teach me how to say, you know, if I was upset about something and I said something, he would say, okay, what I'm hearing you say is this. And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying. Because when I'm speaking out of anger and all with all those chemicals going on, I'm usually saying things that aren't very clear. So he would say back to me, are you saying this and this? And I'm like, no. And then he taught me how to do that. So when he said something and I was triggered, felt disrespected, I would say, are you saying this? And he'd say, oh, no, that's not what I'm saying. So it was a huge tool for me to speak back to the other person what you're actually saying, like repeat it. Are you saying this? And most of the time, because of my complex trauma and my emotional outbursts, most of the time I was wrong. So that was a huge tool for me to just say it back so that we make sure that we're understanding the same things. 3 is to walk away. And there are some times that we just can't deal with it. My emotions are too intense. I'm in the middle of something else. Sometimes you have to walk away and say, okay, tomorrow morning we're going to talk about it. So it gives you time to calm down, rethink what you thought you heard, rethink your reactions, all that kind of stuff. So we call that an adult timeout. Sometimes we just need it. And there's that Bible verse that says, don't go to bed with anger, or don't let the sun go down on your anger. Like, I get all that, but there are times when you need to take a step back. Especially if you got people with complex trauma. Number 4 is to channel your anger. This is where the vacuuming comes in. Yeah, do something physical. It actually says down there, physical activity. Go do some sports, go to the gym, go for a swim. It doesn't have to be something physical, but you could go and sit and just write in your diary, your journaling, write everything down, all your feelings and stuff. What was the other one? Oh, do something creative. I have a sewing room, so I'd go into my sewing room if I'm upset about something and I just am not ready to deal with it yet or talk about it, and I'll just start to do something creative. So that's not avoiding. We're not saying, I'm never going to deal with that, I'm going to go and do something else. It's just taking a little bit of time for yourself to do something else, and then you can come back to it. So we never say that you're gonna avoid it at all costs. We're gonna channel our anger physically or creatively or mentally, and then come back to it. So number five is to avoid triggering people. No kidding, right?
That kind of sounds like walking on eggshells.
Walking on eggshells, well, it could be. You may have to just take that time apart. But as soon as, and then Tim used to do this too, he'd get right in my face, okay, we're gonna deal with it now, right? And that just triggered my complex trauma and my anger and stuff. So he had to learn not to get me upset in those situations until we had time to calm down, de-escalate, get in control of our emotions again. It's all like a balance, right? So yeah, we have to walk on eggshells sometimes. As long as you go back to it. Number 6 is practice skills. And that's where we did the role playing. You guys did such a fantastic job doing the role playing, right? So sometimes we have to do some role playing. Somebody you trust, somebody that is kind of helping you on your journey. What, can we just do this? I want to know if saying this is going to make somebody upset. Can I say this? Is it okay to feel this way? Role playing is a really, I mean, I would have a hard time. That kind of thing freaks me out, role playing. I mean, you guys, I'm so proud of you guys for doing what you did. That would just totally humiliate me. So I wouldn't do it. But some people just need to be able to do that. I see it.
You're taking me there.
Oh, that's so sad. Yeah, so we have to practice sometimes to make sure that we're doing the healthy thing, because we're learning about being healthy, but we're not sure if we're quite there yet. 7 is self-care. Mani-pedi. So we need to take time for ourselves, de-escalate, kind of get our emotions under control. We need to do something that makes us feel warm and cozy. Just something that helps us to relax. And that is a really important part of dealing with anger, because often Tim and I, if we have something going on, we'll say, okay, let's just kind of do our thing, and then in the morning we'll talk. And by the morning, if I've done some really good self-care and I'm feeling better, the next morning I'm not so emotionally involved anymore. It's just a simple conflict that we can work through. But I also had to take care of myself that evening and go do something that I needed to do so that I can feel better about the whole situation.
I think that could also be considered grounding.
Grounding, yeah. And we're going to talk about that next week, Here's a funny one, is humor. And with that, you have to be a little bit careful. We're not talking about sarcasm. We're not talking about little shots that we want to take to make the other person feel bad. This is real, genuine humor. And there's some really good ways of doing that.
Lollipop?
A lollipop! Exactly. Perfect example. Yeah, it would just kind of make everybody kind of laugh and relax a little bit. Yes, of course. So that's an excellent one. Oh, and then 9 is seek help. And a lot of you guys are counselors, and you understand that sometimes you just need a mediator to come in, kind of help you to see both sides of the situation, and there's no shame in that. Of course, because we've got lots of shame, that's a hard thing to do, but we just try to tell our clients there's no shame in asking for help. So just a few notes on this. We have to make sure that we tell our clients that anger is not a bad emotion. How we respond to it can be healthy or unhealthy. Anger, again, teaches us that there's a wound, that there's something bad going on that we need to deal with. Anything that violates love, justice, respect. Anger is okay, it's not all bad. We have to learn to be gentle with ourselves, because this takes practice. It's a process of learning how to deal with it. We also need to remind them that they are not their anger. That is not their only who they are. They are a wonderful creation by God. You may have some anger issues, but that is not who you are. You are this over on this side, this healthy, wonderful creation. We aim for progress, not the elimination of anger. Progress is good, even if somebody comes back the next morning and say, I did this, it wasn't perfect, but I did take a step towards healthy anger. And they're always very pleased with small progresses, and we need to keep encouraging that. And again, good anger is built into us. It's a God-given emotion. We just need to learn how to deal with it appropriately. Any comments or questions? And we came right to 1 o'clock. It's perfect.
Good.
No problem.
So Mondays 4 p.m.
Monday is what?
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
And it is resentment and another one as
Oh,
well.
do we get to role play again?
Maybe. We'll see.
I'll be really resentful.
Oh, you guys are so good at that. I love this.